The results of the COVID-19 vaccine trials are starting to come in, and they're looking good. We could see distribution as early as December.
This is the news that we've been waiting to hear. Pfizer and BioNTech reporting the first results from their phase 3 vaccine trial.
Just a sigh of relief.
Another historic day. 94.5% efficacy for your vaccine.
In the history of medicine, the quickest vaccine to have ever been developed took 4 years. This took 8 months.
These vaccines have the potential to be real game changers as we go into 2021. You can effectively end the U.S. epidemic.
And Pfizer isn't the only one making huge strides in the vaccine race. We now have 3 extremely promising vaccine candidates, and at least one more on the way. But there is one pretty big problem: physically getting the vaccine to all of the over 330 million people living in the U.S.
The worst thing that could happen is we had vaccine delivered and we're still not ready to distribute.
The vaccine distribution and program implementation is going to be the most complex vaccination program ever attempted in human history.
To achieve herd immunity, experts say that about 70% of the population needs to be vaccinated or have natural antibodies. Pfizer's vaccine requires 2 doses. That's 462 million doses for herd immunity and 660 million doses for the entire population that will need to be manufactured, financed, distributed, and administered. And even then, not even Pfizer knows how long protection against the virus will last.
So how are we going to get a coronavirus vaccine to every person living in the U.S., especially to those in remote corners of the country? And how much will it cost? Distributing a vaccine to the general public requires a whole lot of steps, most of which need to happen concurrently. You have public communication campaigns, the ordering of equipment, the hiring of staff, the training of vaccine providers, the development and rollout of technology to track inventory and ordering, not to mention the added complexity in this pandemic of making sure that all vaccine sites are safe and won't contribute to the spread.
Typically, in the U.S., our routine immunization system is run via 2 channels, the public sector and the private sector. But the COVID vaccine is going to follow a different model.
This program is nationalized. There is no private sector. There's no commercial access. If you have $100, you can't go out and buy this vaccine on the open market. The federal government pays for it. The federal government is responsible for distribution of the vaccine, working with state and local public health to get the vaccine to immunization providers who have enrolled to participate in this national vaccination program.
The CDC is providing a national playbook for states to follow, but industry analysts say that a lot of the onus of distribution will actually come down to the individual states and local governments.
These states are going to be customizing the response to fit the needs of their population, their particular circumstances.
Most states will also need to beef up their IT systems to keep pace with distribution. One of the most complex parts of this whole rollout is just keeping up with who has had what vaccine, how many doses, and crucially, what are the latest stats on inventory levels. Another major issue, making sure all these different systems talk to one another.
So some of those systems have not been used before. So I think we all have reasonable concerns that there will be some stumbling blocks.
Especially thank this group for joining us as we announce a historic groundbreaking initiative.
On May 15, 2020, the Trump administration unveiled Operation Warp Speed, a more than $13 billion initiative to develop, manufacture, and distribute a coronavirus vaccine. As of November 2020, there are 4 COVID-19 vaccines in large-scale Phase 3 clinical trials. That's the stage when researchers test a large number of people to compare an experimental treatment to standard therapies and then evaluate the overall risks.
We have the vaccine that pharma giant Pfizer developed with its German partner BioNTech. Another from U.S. biotech firm Moderna. British pharma company AstraZeneca is working on another in collaboration with the University of Oxford. And then Johnson & Johnson is working on a 1-dose shot. Of those 4, Operation Warp Speed seeded all but Pfizer with cash for R&D.
We didn't take a single cent from anybody. The reason why I did it is because I wanted to liberate our scientists from the bureaucracy that comes together when you are accepting money from a governmental organization. And also I wanted to keep Pfizer out of politics.
Now, it is worth noting that the U.S. government will pay Pfizer nearly $2 billion to produce and deliver 100 million doses of its vaccine. Pfizer's vaccine also happens to be the first one in the pipeline for public consumption. So let's start there, with a look at its supply chain from factory to arm.
Once the FDA grants emergency authorization, the CDC is next on deck. They decide who gets the vaccine and when, and the agency has already come up with a prioritization model to ration those initial doses. Meanwhile, as the vaccine was still in the thick of clinical trials, Pfizer was making hundreds of thousands of doses at two of the company's manufacturing sites in Michigan and Belgium.
Unlike the three other vaccine candidates, Pfizer's is especially difficult to store and ship. It needs to be kept super cold. We're talking minus 94 degrees Fahrenheit cold in a sealed box with dry ice.
That suitcase-sized box, something they call a thermal shipper, contains anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 doses. These custom thermal shippers act as mobile freezers for clinics that don't have the necessary specialty equipment. Once that box of doses arrives at its destination, the countdown clock begins. Vaccines can last for up to 15 days in those boxes, so long as the thermal shipper is not open more than twice in a day for no longer than a minute each time. The dry ice also needs to be replenished within 24 hours after arriving at its destination, then again 5 days later, and another 5 days after that. At that point, the vaccine has to be thawed out in a normal refrigerator where it lasts for about 5 days. So without ultra-low temperature freezers, there's really only 20 days between shipping and injection, which doesn't leave much of a margin for error. Because of all these highly specific protocols, Pfizer is opting out of the government's suggestion to use McKesson, a third-party distributor. Instead, they're doing it themselves.
CDC will receive vaccine orders from the states and approve those based on the number of doses CDC has allocated to that particular state. Then CDC will communicate that to Pfizer. Pfizer will then ship the vaccine to the location that the state has specified and the quantity the state has specified. And then from there, the state will administer the vaccine as it sees fit.
And keep in mind, it's administered in 2 doses and given a few weeks apart. So the role of states in coordinating delivery is hugely important. 64 states, cities, and territories have released their preliminary distribution proposal, and more should be coming soon.
See some states really planning to store it themselves and manage that distribution and drive it out to these rural areas. And we see other states coming up with more centralized places to get the vaccine and actually planning those clinics ahead of time and not shipping the vaccine until the day when those clinics will occur.
The fragility of this vaccine makes distribution in rural areas where populations are more spread out even more of a challenge. But Pfizer isn't worried. It's loading as many as 24 trucks per day and sending them directly to nearby airports. This amounts to the daily transit of roughly 7.6 million doses to countries around the world. And on November 17th, the company launched a pilot delivery program for the vaccine in Rhode Island, Texas, New Mexico, and Tennessee, all to try to address those ultra-cold storage distribution issues. The other vaccines appear to be a lot easier to work with. Johnson & Johnson is a 1-dose shot, and the vaccine from Moderna remains stable at 36 to 46 degrees Fahrenheit, the temperature of a typical home refrigerator, for up to 30 days. Plus, it lasts for 6 months at minus 4 degrees Fahrenheit. These are pretty standard conditions in the pharma industry.
Another big pro? Order size. As opposed to Pfizer's minimum order of 975 doses, Moderna is offering batch sizes of 100 doses. Also, unlike Pfizer, Moderna is going to use that third-party distributor McKesson. They'll be responsible for delivering both the vaccine and all the ancillary supplies like syringes and alcohol prep pads.
The federal government has developed a partnership with large pharmacy chains and independent pharmacies. Josh Michaud is an associate director for global health policy at the Kaiser Family Foundation. He says the U.S. government's agreements cover about 60% of pharmacies across the country.
They will be shipping vaccine doses directly to those pharmacies, and those pharmacies will be distributing the vaccines to individuals.
Somewhere between $5.5 and $6 million is what I think it's going to take to distribute this vaccine.
And you don't have that money right now?
No, sir.
The government has spent about $10 billion to develop the vaccine. But so far, states have only received $200 million from the CDC for distribution.
We need the federal government to be a competent partner with this state and with every state.
$140 million more is supposed to come in mid-December, but that's just a fraction of what health departments say is necessary.
The state and local governments are under financial strain and stress right now, both a loss in revenue from taxes and increased expenses because of the pandemic.
Nearly 40% of the $8.4 billion requested by health departments is supposed to go to recruitment and training. The rest is for infrastructure, IT modernization, reporting, cold supply chain management, oversight, and outreach. Claire Hannon worked with states during the H1N1 influenza.
What we did really was look at how much things cost in 2009 and what kinds of things went into the response. This takes staffing. An example, for a flu clinic, you can probably vaccinate 30 people in an hour with one nurse. With the Pfizer vaccine, Pfizer is estimating 10 minutes per, dial-up, and that's so you're looking at vaccinating 6 people in an hour.
Mobilizing that kind of cash fast isn't going to be easy, especially as talks on Capitol Hill over additional stimulus money remain in limbo.
States cannot do this on their own, okay?
In October, the CDC asked 64 states, major territories, and cities to submit their plans for distributing the vaccine. Virginia, for example, included a gap analysis and found that it needed around $121 million to get ready. So far, the state has received just under $5.4 million.
The cost-benefit analysis here seems pretty clear. We need to take whatever steps necessary and provide whatever resources are necessary to make sure that we do a good job in getting this vaccine to the places it needs to go, because this is such an important piece of our resuming normal economic activity.
Addressing American people's wariness to get the vaccine will be another key to life returning to normal. And polls are showing a concerning trend. A Washington Post and ABC survey from May found that 7 out of 10 Americans were confident in the vaccine. But by July, that number had dropped to 66%. By August, to 61%. And in late September, only 50% of Americans said they would get the vaccine if it was available today, according to a Gallup panel.
The types of things we need to do to earn the public's confidence in this program include being open and honest about what we know and what we don't know. As we know, the number one factor in a person's decision to get vaccinated is a strong healthcare provider recommendation. So we are responsible for making sure those healthcare providers know what they need to know to be comfortable answering their patients' questions.
Getting a vaccine produced in 8 months is unprecedented, so roadblocks are to be expected. Yet the question remains, when will it actually be possible for the average person to get the COVID-19 vaccine? As of now, the plan is for those initial doses to be, quote, prioritized.
Prioritization would be based on risk, and essential workers would have a priority, and people at risk.
By the time the general population is being vaccinated, it's likely the federal government will have added $20 to $30 billion to its pandemic relief pile of taxpayer money, just for the vaccine alone. But experts say that in all scenarios, it will have been worth the investment.
We have lost trillions of dollars. We're never going to get back jobs, livelihoods, and most importantly, human lives. And no amount of investment now is going to bring back those lives, but the investment of a few $billion in maintaining a strong public health infrastructure and getting a vaccine to the public to bring this pandemic to a close will be the best investment that we can make.